Thanks for joining us today on UPD. We're still on this series, Fatherhood. Today's episode is Rebellion.
You know, we talked about today what it looks like when kids rebel at different stages of life, and then how do we as parents respond to that? And then how do we help change behavior so that when they're older, they'll be focusing mostly on Christ?
Yeah, it was a great conversation. We dig into a lot of different categories of age development and how that parenting can look. So we really put something together for you guys today.
Check it out. Welcome to the UPD podcast.
Designed to point men towards Jesus.
Real life, real talk. Join us. I'm Andy Lamb.
I'm Jonny Hanson.
This is the UPD podcast. Do you think Carl do you think he's in the recesses of hell? Or do you think, and he's like, just get me out.
He's hollering. I don't know what he's hollering about.
Hey, welcome to our podcast. This is the Untrained Philosophical Discussionist. My name is Andy Lamb.
Hey, friends. My name's Jonny Hanson. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, we do this thing weekly. How the heck are you, bud?
I'm good, man.
Good.
By the way, you can find us. We call ourselves UPD, and anytime you hear us talk about us, it's UPD, and you can find us on Instagram and Facebook and maybe TikTok. Who knows if you'll be able to find us there any longer?
They might be taking that one down.
Could be. But we want this to be interactive with you guys, and so if you would like to send in any messages, questions, anything like that, you can email us at updpodcast@gmail.com or just direct message us.
Heck yeah, do that. You should get a hold of us. Also, gosh, we say this every time, but it always deserves saying, which is, if you know somebody, we have a pretty long catalog now. This is going to be episode 40 today. And we've got a pretty broad selection of things that we think are useful. Certainly were useful in our life to change, and you might find them useful for yourself or someone you know. And the best way you can help our podcast, if that is your intention, is to pass it along to somebody that might appreciate something or might learn something or might be struggling with something specifically that we've already covered in the catalog.
Yeah. It shows support. You know, we can't do this out without support of people. And those of you that are active listeners week to week, we just want to say thank you for, just making this something that's a part of your life. Our hope is that we get to use our lives and mostly the mistakes we make. We say this, we got about 100 years of experience between the two of us, most of it mistakes. And we want to take those mistakes and we want to be able to help the next person. We want to be able to disciple people as they kind of try to make their lives look a little bit more like Jesus.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
Perfect. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Been finally out of that flu, RSV, whatever that was, man. I had it almost 3 weeks.
My good buddy Tim Kelly said he had to go to the urgent care. He was feeling so sick from it. And he'd been sick for like 2 weeks himself.
Yeah.
Yikes.
I was never like laying in bed sick. It was just that congested, like my voice wasn't as strong as it should be, which you can even hear over the last couple of weeks as we've recorded as well. When I finally feel like I'm on the other side of that, thank God.
Good. That's great.
Not fun.
Our good buddy Dave Fox texted me the other day, said he's feeling better too. So I guess that kind of leads us to have a conversation about in the near future here, we're going to do some interviewing. You've probably seen by the time this episode drops that we've worked on the interview space, a little more comfortable, little more intimate of a space with some chairs that we can sit at. And we intend to bring in some pretty awesome friends of ours and some people we respect initially, and who knows from there, to interview and kind of get their perspective on some of these larger topics that we discuss here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. We're very blessed in our circle of influence, the people that we have in our lives that have a lot of years of experience doing things the wrong way we have and now applying it to their lives for years and years and years and years. And so we glean from them, and we just want to be able to share their lives with you as well because we think it could be impactful.
Yeah. And again, this time we're partnering with our good friends at Commission 127.
Yeah, Rashad and Betsy Bell.
Yep.
C127.org. C127.org.
And they gave us, by the way, I just want to say, this is something that we said partner because we actually believe in this. This is something, they're not paying us anything to do this. This is something that we appreciate them.
In fact, we give them money.
We give their organization money because we see how well they're good stewards of the money that we give them, and we trust them. And I'm going to read you here their little bio. And near the end of it, you're going to hear why we're so dedicated to this trust that we have in them. Betsy and Rashad, married for over 20 years, were called to foster children from hard places in 2013. Since then, they've grown their family to 6 kids, 2 grandbabies, and 1 son-in-law. They experienced an overwhelming child welfare system, isolation, neglect, and the unpreparedness of families called to care for kids from hard places. They had a front row seat on why 50% of foster families quit after the first placement. They used to believe that every believer should either foster or adopt because the book of James admonishes us on what true religion is, to care for orphans. They soon realized that we are not all called to foster or adopt, but we are all called to care. However, there was never a simple way for everyone to care. Until one day they discovered a model that helped churches and their people care for kids from hard places, bringing 1 meal a month, bringing a tired foster mom a coffee, or leading a family advocacy ministry at your church. You can help 90% of families foster 2 to 3 times longer. How is God calling you to care? Discover how to care at c127.org. That's c127.org.
Yeah, I don't believe that my wife and I are called to foster kids, but as they said in there, James 1 does tell us that to take care of widows and orphans. And so that is a calling that we do have. And so, if you would like to financially support them in any way, I can't encourage you enough, no matter what that dollar amount is. There are a lot of kids in the foster care system, and they've done an incredible job of, number one, bringing some of those kids out. But, 50% of families that foster one time and then they don't foster again because of the stress of it. It's hard. And so they've done an amazing job coming alongside of them and helping
showing
support.
that when you do step in, those numbers can increase dramatically.
They can.
Another thing we didn't talk about, I don't know how much we'll get into as we move further into this fatherhood series that we're working on today and throughout the last couple of weeks, but 85% of all people in prison were in a fatherless home.
Wow.
85%. I mean, if that doesn't show you a direct correlation at such high numbers like that, I don't know what else can.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about it's not just like the majority, it's like nearly everyone who's in prison had a fatherless home. And what is that? And how can we go about impacting that? I don't think some of these things that like society would tell us to do, I don't think work.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see that because the results are ever increasing.
Yeah.
But the Bible says that we should be helping these orphans and we should be helping these widows. And I think we don't do enough of that.
I'm agreeing with you there. And I want to be super, super careful with this, like the 85% of fatherless homes. That is not to the detriment of moms.
No.
Right. That's not a downplay on what moms are doing. It's just the way God created this. You were created for roles, and our role as a dad is to be a voice to kids, a lot of times a disciplinarian, especially with sons.
My wife said it. She said, what do you do in our household that's the most important thing? You set the vision for the household,
Mm-hmm.
And that's an honor, by the way.
It is.
It's not to say that a woman doesn't have her own visions of what she sees for herself, but God did design us certain ways. And as a man, it is both a responsibility and it can be a burden too, to carry that vision of the household. It's a lot to bear on your shoulders, which is why we always tell you, get into the book, start reading about God, who God says you are, so that you can always be fortified and ready for those situations. But if you're lacking that kind of vision in the household, especially because when you go to the numbers, 70+% of people in prison are men. So men specifically need another man in their life to help them see what the vision of an older man looks like. How do I get from this youthful vision of myself, completely, I'm searching for a word it's escaping me completely, but it's invincible.
Yeah.
I had those thoughts when I was young. There was no thought of like outcomes, or I never played the tape through to see what would be the outcome of doing this dumb thing I'm about to do.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, how could I die? I'm invincible. I had that feeling, and we have that feeling when we're young, or just a lack of follow through in our minds of what things could be. And a man stepping beside a young boy or a young girl for that matter. I don't have a girl's mind, so it's hard for me to say. I know that my wife says how pivotal her father was in setting her vision for who she wanted to be as a woman, and she's tremendous. So she would say the same thing if she was here. But as a young man, and seeing such increasing numbers in prison population of men, it's very clear to me that a man didn't step in an opportune time and help these children see that their vision of themselves in the future, they were making choices right now that would impact that future. That's terrible, man.
It is. And we'll talk about this next week in our interview. But this is why we believe the role of mentors and coaches is so pivotal. If we know that 85% of people that end up in prison are in fatherless homes, there are the other men in their lives that can step in that role and help to be a voice of reason for them, to help guide them into a different direction.
If a mentor steps in, and I'm going to go through some of these numbers, it's 50% less likely to go to prison. So half the people would go to prison if they just had a male mentor step in from time to time. And it doesn't mean, again, like what Betsy and Rashad are stating, and to kind of finalize this point for them, it takes, like, if you can't do it full time, get some people together. It takes a village.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what you can do, you know, you say, oh, I can't take a kid into my house, so I guess I'll do nothing. No, that doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be, there's this organization. There's probably some other organizations like it. We like this one because we know the people that run it, and we know that they're good stewards of our money.
And solid in their faith.
And they're solid in their faith, and their family's super awesome. So we trust them. But the point is you could be stepping in. There are people in your life with such a high population of fatherless houses. Everyone knows a woman that's raising kids right now. Everyone knows one. By the way, you probably know a man too that's raising kids. Both those people need help. And you have opportunities to step in where you can just say, hey, can I give you a little break? What does a break look like? It can be that cup of coffee they mentioned in that little post there. That's it. Mm-hmm. Bring a coffee and you sit with them for a couple hours and say, hey, how the heck are you? This is a big job you're taking on. What's it look like all the time? And they might go, God, you know, I'm running ragged here. I haven't had time to go to the grocery store. And you can go, well, guess what I can do for you? I'll go to the grocery store. Make me up a list. What do you need? And
I'll sit here with your kids while you get out of the house and have a break for a little bit, right?
Even better, right? Any of these things. That's what we're always trying to encourage here at UPD is engage. When? Now.
Yeah.
Well, I can't do this big thing. Then do something. Mm-hmm. You know, at our church, Mike set such a great example of saying the next step towards Christ. He's not saying anything more than that. It's always that. And it reminds me, outside of what he's saying, just about how I can be impactful. You know, we consistently find ourselves being putting stuff off that we don't have to.
Yeah.
Because we say, I can't do this biggest thing.
Well, very often when we think about future, in our brains, we're like, well, I want to be 10 steps down the road, but you don't get to be 10 steps down the road.
I want to arrive. That's what we're saying. Is I want to arrive. And it's like,
it doesn't work like that. You have to take these incremental steps. That's why the beauty of take your next step is I can do that, because that next step can be something super simple.
Yeah.
So I take that one step. All right, I accomplished that. Now I can take the next one. What's the next one? Now I can accomplish that. And by having these short-term goals that I'm achieving, it's easier for me to see I can finally arrive.
Well, and we're built that way. God made us that way, that as we achieve little things, we feel more confident to take on the next step. That's and the next step and the next step. And as we build those successes, they build internally to fortify, you know, who you are as a person. Like, I can do these things. And then boom, you're opening up this new realm for yourself to be able to do even more and more and more.
That's good, man.
Yeah.
That's good.
So we like to start our podcast not just with talking about Betsy and Rashad, though we love them. Thanks, guys, for partnering with us on this. We like to start with a proverb. Would you like to read today's Proverbs, homie?
I absolutely want to read.
Put on your glasses.
Thank you,
Grandpa.
My old man. It's so bad. I wear glasses just pretty much all the time now. It is what it is. I just need to go get LASIK and be done with it. Proverbs 17:11, and it says, an evil man is bent only on rebellion. A merciless official will be
merciful. A merciful.
Sorry.
It's okay. Just want to make sure we get that one right. I want to repeat it.
Official will be sent against him. So an evil man, our topic for the day is we're talking about what do you do when a child rebels? So that's our topic for the day. And so we always like to take this proverb and apply it to it. And so an evil man is bent only on rebellion. 75% of youth rebel in some way. And rebellion is
Not
just
100%?
like when I was looking it up, it's 75%.
I wonder what they define rebellion as.
Well, when I looked up rebellion and I wanted to kind of,
Well, we'll probably get into that. Sorry, I don't mean to sidetrack you. We can hit that up in a bit.
Yeah,
Keep
well-
going with your point.
but point is this, if we know that a high percentage of kids rebel, we know that there's going to be consequences that come with that. And our hope, especially when it comes to our kids, is that they don't have to deal with the legality of some of these issues that they could be coming up with, because this merciful official will be sent against him. That could be the law. It could be you. It could be a variety of things. But Romans 13:1 tells us that all authority was instituted by God. And it says that when we go against the authority of this world, that we're actually going against the authority of God. And so we should know on the backside when we rebel that there's consequences that come with that. Now, our hope, especially when it comes to kids, is that, that the consequences that they bear aren't life-changing consequences, but because we have a God that loves us, he will send somebody after. He will chase you. He will, because he loves you and he wants to bring you back to him.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I'm going to repeat it. Proverbs 17:11, an evil man is bent only on rebellion. A merciful official will be sent against him. And I thought, as I was reading this, I must have read it 10 times in a row. And I went back and I went back to Proverbs 17:10, which says, a rebuke impresses a man of discernment more than 100 lashes a fool. A rebuke impresses a man of discernment more than 100 lashes a fool. And what's being contrasted there, and this is how I start to get to this 17:11. A man who has discernment would accept when, and I hope to be a man of discernment, is I run an idea past you and you'll go, hey man, that's dumb and here's why.
Right.
And I go, and I accept your rebuke and I course correct. But a foolish man,
a cruel messenger will be sent against him.
yeah.
It is merciless.
Oh, well, all right. Thanks for sidetracking the whole bloody thing.
I was like, I'm pretty sure I wrote that down right. Okay.
All right.
Keep going.
Can we
Sorry.
get back to my idea? Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. Do you want to listen to this then?
I'm intent.
All right. So a rebuke impresses a man of discernment. So if you say to me, something that I've come up with or that I'm doing is foolish, because I believe I have discernment, I should course correct. But if I'm a fool, you can whip me 100 times, 100 lashes, and I can go back and do the same thing. And in fact, that's kind of some of the hallmarks of an evil man, is a man that will consistently be rebuked physically and start to take punishment physically, like go to prison. And then it's not a surprise that these guys, and they're always separated out. Some guys will go to prison, you never go to prison again. They learn their lesson.
Mm-hmm.
It could be said. We know guys like that.
Yeah.
And they're good guys now. Man, it's a straight course because they're not trying to ever go back to that place. They figured it out. And then there's other guys that go back and back and back and back and back and back. And I think what separates them is that discerning thing. And there's an evilness to continuing to do the same thing and get those results,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're facing, like this thing says, 100 lashes. So an evil man is bent only on rebellion, meaning, well, let's define rebellion. Rebellion, it says, is disobedience against an authority. That's just a plain way of saying it. I have a more biblical way of saying it here in a minute. But if that's the case, then this evil person's only going to be doing that anyways. That's just their course. And regardless of what's going to happen. And then we know that that's the same type of person that'll go, everybody's against me. It's always somebody else's issue. It's never me.
Yeah.
It's never what I've done that's got me to this place. So there's no reflection because they don't have discernment.
Right.
And then a merciful official or a merciless, either way,
Mm-hmm.
official will be sent against him. Yeah, at some point in time, the outcome of that will either be here or it'll be God, because we are eternal creatures. So we believe that, even if and this is what's so difficult sometimes to fully comprehend and settle peacefully with, is when you see people that do evil and then are rewarded for it on this plane of existence. And you're like, how is there no justice for these people?
When you explain when you mean rewarded for it, you mean they're just not punished for it.
Sure.
Is that...
No, I mean rewarded. I mean, there's politicians that have committed acts in this country, we don't have to get into them, that have done things that I think are just atrocious, that millions of people have died because of.
Mm-hmm.
And they're rewarded with large salaries once they leave the presidency. These are wildly rich men and women that now reach these levels of power and authority in our country. And then when they get out of it, they somehow get richer. We talk about this. Mm-hmm. We don't get into politics here really, but between us friends and anybody out there listening, you know what I'm talking about. And you can feel like, well, they're not following the rules. Why should I? You hear consistently about like senators who get stock tips and make stock decisions on these businesses that'll succeed or fail, and they're wildly rich. And you feel like, what is that? If there's a God, there should be some justice here. We believe, and then we settle our hearts with, that yes, this is an injustice that these people do this. It's disgusting and we don't like it. And even if they don't get justice here, someday they'll have to face the Creator, and the Creator's going to go, they're going to lay all of their stuff before them and go, what should grant you entry in this?
Yeah, that's book of Revelation. It says the books will be open.
That's right.
And God's going to take a look at our lives and see what we did and did not do. Now, thankfully, what we do on this earth, like our works, as we talk about on here, has nothing to do with our salvation. Our salvation is in Jesus, but there is something to be said about the choices and the way that we live.
Faith without works is dead.
That's what James tells us.
So we should still be, you should be able to look at the results of my life, the fruit of my life, and say, this is a man of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not happening,
it's evident by how you live your life, right?
I think so.
Fruit in your life, absolutely it is.
Yeah.
It's evident by that.
A merciful official might not be here, and that can be frustrating and disappointing, especially when it's so flagrant, and especially when it costs so many people so much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that can be frustrating here. That's why, boy, it's been a real mercy for me, speaking of merciful, to be able to trust that God's got a bigger plan, and to be able to step outside of my own frustrations with earthly things and go like, all right, God, you got a plan. I know. Look at me getting all festered out.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Really, at the end of the day, it's about, I need to focus on what I can control and what I can't control.
That one step again.
Right. And
we know constantly moving back to that.
That's exactly right.
What's the step I can be taking that is for me, for my household, for my sphere of influence?
Yeah. And you can look at those people that are making those. It's the age-old question of why do good things happen to bad people?
Mm-hmm.
And we can either focus on that, on why these people who are making poor decisions in life feels like they're getting rewarded. But, you know, the Matthew tells us that store up for yourself treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy, where thieves do not break in and steal. But if you're hyper-focused on the earth and what can I gain, what material possessions, what does my bank account look like, and then that becomes my social credit is, you know, my value to what I bring to this world, then you get spiritual blinders to anything else because you're being rewarded. So in your mind, what I'm doing must be good, and I'm here and you're not.
Well, and Jesus talks about the plank in your own eye.
Yeah.
So as Christians, we're going to miss the mark constantly. I do.
Yeah.
So the second part of that thing, when you start going, God, you got a plan, he's going to go, yeah. And can we start working on the plank in your eye?
Yeah.
And then you go, oh yeah, gosh, I'm really looking over there and pointing my finger quite a bit, ain't I? Boy, why don't I go ahead and get that back here and go, okay, me and where am I at? Oh, I'm falling short in this way. Let me go ahead and step up in my thing and worry about my sphere once again.
It's that vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So
yeah, great.
He'll take care of them on that day.
Mm-hmm.
They will face the Almighty God, and they'll have to give an account for the decisions that they made to better themselves in spite of what they're going to do to other people.
Well, let's transition here now to the topic of the day, which is, you know, we've been on this fatherhood series. So far, we unpacked what is a father, stages of fatherhood. Today, we're going to talk about rebellion and what that looks like in the household. And there's a couple of different kinds of rebellion. That's kind of what I was kind of pointing at a minute ago when you said 75% of kids rebel. I wonder if they're not speaking of something a little more.
Well, they said 20% of kids rebel to the point where they actually cause like social problems in their life.
Okay.
So there's definitely different levels of rebellion. I think when I read that 75% number, I was like, well,
How's it not
that's
100?
factoring boys and girls. If we're talking just boys, that's probably closer to 100.
I would think it's 100 period, only because I think every kid is always challenging their boundaries. I just don't know what rebellion is. I put rebellion as this. So what does the Bible say rebellion is? Do you know?
I think Bible would talk about rebellion in the way you just described it.
What is sin?
It's going against authority or going against the control.
What is sin?
It's a perversion of the good.
It's a rebellion against God's way.
Mm-hmm.
Sin is a rebellion against God's way. Voluntary or involuntary, you're part of a rebellion against God if you sin.
That's right.
Okay. So I wrote rebellion as disobedience against God and his authority. It is a serious offense and has spiritual consequences, such as separation from God in death. So if you never seek redemption with God, put yourself under Christ and ask Christ into your heart and submit yourself to him, you can find yourself at the end of this life separated from God.
That's it. But rebellion against God still happens all throughout.
You'll
right?
still
Even though,
continue to rebel. Yeah, because we continue to sin.
That's right. But when you are a follower of Christ, then this is the purpose of repentance.
Absolutely.
I had a lunch with a guy the other day, and the question he asked me is, how do you stay like focused on Christ? And my response to him was, I live every day under repentance. I try to stay under this short leash with God that when I mess up,
go right back to him.
Go right back to him.
Hey, man, here's what I just did. Doggone it.
And he knows, right? He just wants me to surrender my life to him in that way. What happens is when we make these small choices to sin and we don't come to God in repentance, we just allow that gap between us and God to grow to where eventually
small little steps.
Yep.
Further and further away till you look back and you don't realize,
how did I even get here?
That's exactly it.
Right. That's the life of a Christian. And so often, I mean, when we talk rebellion, that's how that rebellion works. It's just taking these little steps of just trying to see what I can get away with. And then eventually they gotten so far away that I don't even know how to get back there again.
So that rebellion to redemption thing, I think, is what we're going to see is how you can course correct for your kids. Mm-hmm. As we move through today, that's really when I went through all these different stages of rebellion and how it manifests at different age groups, because that's really what I had to do, again, is kind of approach it from a young adolescence to a preteen to a teen to an adult, because now we've got adult kids. It's like, how do you handle these rebellions? Well, it's different at every stage. Holy smokes. And really what we're always looking for, as Christ is looking for us, is some repentance. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many times when I was a kid, when I'd get out of line and my dad would put me, he'd ground me or something. And what he's really looking for is for me to come and go, hey man, here's what I did wrong. And I'm sorry about doing that. And usually when I would come to him and approach him, my dad's a great dad, and he wouldn't relinquish his grounding. But what he would do is he'd make the grounding less severe in a way of like, hey, why don't we go get something? Let's you and I go do something together. Come with me. And it would get me out of the house because I'd be grounded to the house or to my bedroom or something. And once I was repentant, I still had to pay a penalty. I'd done what I had done. So if I was grounded for the week, then I was still grounded for the week. Mm-hmm. But he might a couple of times throughout that week take me with him to do something somewhere. It got me out of the house and got me just breathing some air outside. And I remember the difference there. And then that kind of helped me to mature me to see, that's what the adults are looking for, is for me to like recognize my wrong in this situation and be able to course correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much what it is. I think we talked about this last week. It's about you being involved. Like the hours we spend, the majority of it's going to be at work, but when I'm home, I'm intentional about my time spent with them.
Sure.
Because the time we do have dads very often is going to be limited. And so when you do have to discipline, which is a very necessary part of a child's life at all stages of life, just the discipline changes as we go along. But very much of what that discipline is me course correcting and me grabbing a hold of you and me showing you a different path. That's what it is to be a dad, because I'm trying to teach my sons to be men, and I'm trying to teach my daughter what it looks like to have the right kind of man, right? We've talked about that before. And so very often I think especially if you don't like conflict as a person, then it's just easier when it comes to my kids and they screw up that I just pull away from them.
Oh, yeah.
Rather than engage with them.
Right.
right? Especially those younger years when they're just throwing temper tantrums, because that's the rebellion at a younger stage, it's just a temper tantrum.
I got some of that in here
Yeah.
to talk about.
And so I don't want to deal with that. So Mom, you deal with that, right? And that's
Can be, sure.
very often can be. Or do we just let them go about, keep throwing their temper tantrums? Because really what they're doing, they're training us.
Well, they're testing us to
Yes.
see what we'll do. And then they're testing really to see what they can get away with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just with us, it's outside of that. We'll get into that. I thought this was interesting because I want to differentiate between, and because some of this will play in, but again, this is a fatherhood series. So we're talking about disciplining in the house, and we're talking about rebellion in the house and how we as fathers can go about kind of navigating these different
And
rebellions.
to be super clear, it's the reason why we have some of these answers is because we didn't do this right.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So a lot of this is looking back now at the mistakes that we made as fathers. If we could go back with the mindset we have now and change some things, this is how we would change things to help course correct our kids when they were younger.
Yeah. What you'll find that I'm going to mention is how I now treat my nieces and nephews who are kids. Not a lot of, and probably my second son, not a lot with my first son. Why? Because we were young when we had him and dumb, and I did so much insane, wild, reckless, dangerous things that if I went into stories, they're shameful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I have to, because I think anybody who probably had children young and out of wedlock has their own stories that fit this bill.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And we weren't ready. And you don't always have to be ready for a child, but I wasn't mature either. I was very immature, and I was thinking only about me and what I wanted to do. And I'm a musician. How can I be burdened with this child? I mean, terrible thoughts, let alone actions.
Yeah.
I'm not proud of that stuff, but we talk about that kind of stuff on here all the time. That's the thing, is this is a podcast where we have learned a new path, redemption and redeemed. We're trying to set up this paradigm between who we were and how terrible things were, and then how God stepped in and made things different, not us doing different. And there is something in between these two things. This chasm between is so massive. And thankfully in between there too is forgiveness.
Yeah.
So I don't have to feel ashamed currently for these shameful things I did, but I also don't have to glorify them in some sort of way. That's why sometimes we don't get as specific as other times. Sometimes we feel like it's very necessary for us to tell some of the tales from the past to be relatable in the situation. But specifically today, I think it's just easiest for us to kind of speak about some of these things that we know are positive that you can work on, but know that we're always coming from a place of, yeah, we didn't successfully do this all the time. And you won't either, by the way. So you should be able to forgive yourself sometimes as well. And forgive yourself, I mean, seek to redeem yourself and set about course correcting.
I'm glad you clarified that. This terminology of I just need to forgive myself.
Yeah.
Forgiving yourself for the mistakes you made is one thing, but course correcting is another thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's important that people understand that.
There's a difference.
There's an absolute difference. You can't just go, well, I made some mistakes and sorry, me. What are you going to do about it? How am I going to redeem that with my kids? The good news is it's never too late to start. My older two kids, they were in their late teens when my daughter was already out of the house when I got my life together with Jesus.
Sure.
Doesn't mean we did everything wrong along the way, but we did enough wrong along the way.
Well, that's the point. That cannot be understated here, is that even if you don't know Christ, you can probably be a pretty good mom or dad. Fine. Yes, of course. You don't have to be anywhere near as crummy as you or I were in any of the ways. What you want to ask yourself is, do I want to be the best version of who I can be? We firmly believe that the leadership of Christ will lead you to the best overall outcomes for everything. That's the point, right?
It's all that it is.
So I wanted to differentiate between rebellion in the household and then rebellion against God. Because that's a different thing.
Those are two very different things.
There will be some of that potentially as kids reach older ages. You won't probably see a lot of that in their early youth because they're still in such a sponge stage, which is also why we think it's so important for you to engage very thoroughly with your children on who you want them to be when they're young, because that's who they're going to be when they're older. But if you haven't done that, you might see some of this rebellion against God. And I thought C.S. Lewis, Yes. I love, he paints such a good picture. That's why
That's C.S. Lewis was
that
a
is
magician with words.
he says a creature revolting against a creator is revolting against the source of his own power, including even his own power to revolt. It's like the scent of a flower trying to destroy the flower. What? Come on, C.S. Lewis.
Come on, C.
Come on, bro.
That's really good.
Ah, and it is. It's funny. Yeah. Are you rebelling? Where do you think that power comes from? The same creator that created you. So this defiant thing that you have, you think, and I thought, so let me refer to myself. I'm an individual. I'm my own me. I'm doing these things. Nobody's done this thing. I'm gonna differentiate myself in this way. And cause I'm me and da. Neglecting the fact that all power, all things come from God from the beginning of time. Oh boy. Being able to do that, by the way, is a massive relief when you step aside and go, okay, so the actual power of all things comes from God. Whew, boy, that takes a lot of pressure off me.
Sure does.
Because that makes my successes his successes, but it also makes all my failures that I can be redeemed from through him and go, oh man, now, and especially in hindsight now, being able to be so much further along the path of this journey with him is to look back and go, look how far you've taken me. And the evidence is just overwhelming of the change that can happen when you submit that way. So we're not exactly getting into the rebellion against God and what that looks like specifically. What we're talking about in today's rebellion is rebellion in the house.
Yeah. But
was that a fair analysis of that, do you think?
It's a perfect analysis of this. But I would also say that the rebellion in the house is what's going to lead to the rebellion against God.
I couldn't agree more.
And this is the hard part. We read this proverb maybe last week, it was last week when we said, raise up a child in the way they should go, and when they depart, they will not flee from it. And we have these truisms, not promises. So you can do everything correctly, and at the end of the day, it's still another human being that's going to make choices for themselves on which direction they want to go in life.
Yes.
I just want to create the best opportunity to point them in the right direction.
Gosh, that is exactly it. That's all we're saying. It was we're trying to identify together, separately coming up with these concepts, and then we're going to kind of go back and forth here about them. And that, again, that's the podcast, is trying to say, God, what would a good path look like? Because neither one of us walked it. What would that look like? Let's team up on our experience here and kind of throw some things and see if we can set a little bit of a path here that we go, ooh, okay, yeah, that is pretty good. That's better than ours.
Yeah. So let's do that.
Okay. So I think it's important for us, again, we defined rebellion, but what kind of rebellion are you dealing with?
Mm-hmm. It depends on stage of life, right?
All right, great. That's how I got to this. So go ahead, please.
Yeah, so we'll start at a younger age with kids.
Is it attention rebellion or is it danger rebellion?
It's definitely tension rebellion, I would say.
Could be.
Most often for younger.
Most often is a great way of saying it. Sure.
Most often. You said it a moment ago. It's just with kids when they're young, they just want to push the boundary with us. They want to try to figure out where the boundaries are at. They want to maximize that boundary as far as they can to see where they can go with it.
Yes.
And so much of parenting, that one of the best things you can do as parents is to be on the same page. There has to be a consistency inside of homes.
That's a great point. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because very often you'll hear this, like a kid will come and ask mom for something, mom will say no, and then go to dad, and dad will say yes. And so then it
undermines various authorities in the house.
It does. And so always being on the same page when it comes to kids is probably the most important tip I can give any parent that's out there right now that's going, how do we do this?
Sure.
You guys need to have conversations about what is our discipline level? What are we going to put up with and not put up with when it comes to choices that our kids are making? Where are we at on that page?
Yeah,
And as long as you're a team always, that'll help eliminate a lot of the stresses that come along the way with kids. But if you're not having these conversations and you're on two different pages, then kids are smart.
Oh yeah. They're little sponges. They're learning from you, by the way.
Yeah.
So you're here showing them exactly how you're supposed to behave. And then if you're allowing them as they're testing these boundaries to get away with, hey, mom says yes more than dad. Well, especially when they're young and they're only driven by these impulses. They're just little impulse machines.
Yeah.
Um,
I
they're
want to
gonna
stay up. I want to play. I want food.
candy, whatever it is.
Whatever.
Then they're gonna go to mom now, and all of a sudden, dad's a bad guy and mom's a good guy. And then they'll play you against each other, and you'll see that as you move further into life. And that unfortunately becomes something that I've seen. You know, I'm a product of divorce. My parents were divorced. My father zipped out of the picture, and my stepdad stepped in and became my dad and is my dad to this day. Now, the difference is my brother, one of my brothers and one of my sisters, they had a stepdad and a stepmom who they were with 50-50. And the problem can be there, and we seen it in our household, was like both sides want to be liked. And that can really get ugly. And especially as they let that go on, it was like once it got into the teens, my stepdad, my dad, and his ex-wife kind of spoke to it and tried to course correct. But it was years into playing this game, and these kids were like, it's too far. It had happened in those early developmental stages. So even if, again, to restate things, it's when should you be doing these things? Now. If you've been missing the mark, start hitting the mark now. So if you are a divorced parent, and I know some of those, and we know some of those.
Over 50% of the people we know.
Oh, gosh, great point. That's just based on statistics. If you're playing games, or if you even suspect you're playing games, it's still not too late to speak to your ex-spouse and say, hey,
we still have to co-parent.
Here we are. So
Yeah.
I think these things can still apply whether this is in the house or outside of the house. That I kind of make that little sub bar there as you said it.
I think without going through an experience like that, it's easy for me to overlook. But that's so many homes today. It's like the kids are going from one house to another house, and they have different boundaries at different houses. And then, like you said, if parents just want to be the cool ones, then they let their kids have a little bit more freedom when they're at their house, and it's to their detriment.
I had friends that, you know, their mom would let them smoke, and they were like 15.
Oh yeah, I had those friends growing up, neighborhood
Drank
kids
on the weekends.
Yep.
And they were like 15. Like, we couldn't even drive a car yet.
When I was
and
19,
their mom was like giving them stuff.
When I was 19, we'd go hang out at this girl's house, and
of course,
we'd all be drinking beer and smoking cigarettes, and their parents would be there with us, just like laughing and, you know, having a great time. And it's like, and in your mind,
imagine as a parent now, I look back at that and I'm like, that's an abomination of parenthood. Who are you nuts people? You should be locked up.
But I remember you're thinking at 19, like, oh man, I wish my parents
were like these parents. Insane. It's not good.
It isn't at all.
I was thinking of this. If they're attention seeking, our favorite guy, Jordan Peterson, spoke to this child that his family took in. He's done child therapy as well as adult therapy. And early in his career was where the child therapy was happening. And there was this woman who came to him and said, we have a kid. I have a kid. This kid is just nuts. And he will hold his breath till he passes out. And it scares me. So I don't want him to do that. Did you hear this part?
No, but one of my good friends growing up, daughter used to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Jordan Peterson's telling his students about this. This is one of those videos like 12, 15 years ago when he's still in the class.
Yeah.
And he says, so I said, bring the kid in. The kid comes in and we're doing our thing. And this kid would want to do something. And it was always a defiant thing where everybody else is doing something. He wanted to do something else. And then he'd start holding his breath and we'd let him hold his breath. Oh, he's going to pass out. Well, I guess he's going to pass out. Make sure he doesn't fall and crack his head on the ground. But hey, do that over there. And the kid wouldn't get it what he wanted. And eventually, because it's a lot of work, Jordan Peterson is funny because he goes, you as an adult try to hold your breath till you pass out. Tell me how far you get. And he goes, kids are way, way more set on doing something like this than you ever would be as an adult. You think you're going to hold your breath till you pass out? You don't stand a chance in hell. But like this kid would do it. And he's like, this kid did it once and never did it again because we didn't even react to it. And no one's freaking out over him. And, oh, come here, buddy. But the minute he came back in, he goes, you jump back in and you go, hey, you want to rejoin us? Come on. Like, let's go get back into this. And the kid's like, oh, so this behavior is the one that is rewarded.
That's good.
So it made me think of one of my nephews was at our house last summer, springtime. He fell off the bed. And he was like, I had already walked by the room a couple of times and said, hey, man, you're sitting too close to the edge of the bed. Scoot over. Sit with your back against the wall. He's on like a little iPad. And he kind of looks at me and just gives me a look. And all right. And I came back again. Hey, you're too close to the edge of that bed. You better scoot over. And it couldn't have been 2 minutes later. He's crying. And he had already gotten back up. And I go, what happened? And he's, and I couldn't understand. Hey. I can't hear you when you talk like that. What? You gotta get a hold of yourself first. And then he couldn't believe that I wasn't, festered over him and oh, come here, buddy, come on. I was like, no, bud, I can't hear. You got to speak words. I only speak English. I don't know what that is. And I go, when you can get yourself together, you can tell me and I can try to help you with what's going on. I don't know what's going on when you talk like that. Now I knew he had fallen off the bed, but I'm not going to give in to this absurdity of his like screaming. He fell off the bed onto a carpeted, padded floor.
He's fine.
He didn't fall into a pile of broken glass. Okay? He's perfectly fine. I don't know how it happened. By the way, he was already back up, so it's not like I came in there. He's unconscious. He was already back up on the bed. He was just pitching a fit to try to get his mom to come over there and get on after him and pet him and stuff. And I wasn't going to do that. And he figured it out pretty darn quickly that wasn't going to happen. I go, hey, buddy, you got to explain yourself to me. What happened? And finally, he kind of goes, well, I was on the bed and then I fell off the bed. And I go, hey, bud, didn't I tell you can't be that close to the bed? Here, come here. Let's get you seated up. You want to look at that? I understand you want to look at that. Hold on. Let me move you. And I moved his back against the wall. And then I put the pillow up so that he could actually have it. So it was actually a better position for his little iPad. Okay. But I want my mom. I can't hear you when you do that. Hey, listen to me. We speak words in this house, and you're a big boy. I've heard you speak words. You just did a moment ago. You can't be doing this crap. And me not giving in to this fit that he's trying, he keep remembering, I'm crying, crap. And he'd get back into this throwing a fit thing and getting festered and more festered. And it like compounds. Mm-hmm. But his mom, thankfully, in the moment wasn't there. It was just me. And boy, I talked him right off of that. And when she got back, I told my sister, I was like, just so you know, he fell off the bed. Don't bring it up to him. And she goes, oh my gosh, how'd you get him? Is he okay? And he was perfectly fine. He fell under the. Okay. And I go, and I could already see that how she reacts to him is not what happened, clearly. And that's why he thought and I'm talking about a kid throwing a fit.
Right.
And unable to communicate for 6 minutes. Now I didn't leave him because I'm not just going like, hey, piss off, kid. And your injury doesn't matter to me. I stayed in the room with him and talked him off of this overexcitement.
Right.
Yeah?
Yes.
So I'm still showing, hey, I care. And I want to help you, by the way. I kept saying, listen, I want to help you. I need to know what hurts. But I can't understand what you're saying when it's all of this nonsense out here. You got to bring it back in and talk to me, buddy. Mm-hmm. This kid's 5 years old. He's not 18 months old and he can't communicate. That'd be a different way to react, yeah?
Right.
But we're kind of talking about this is that thing that you want to try to be nipping in the bud early, because that kind of behavior, then what does that denote later? That these overly extreme reactions to nonsense gets attention. And by the way, nobody else is going to give him that attention.
Right.
Only his mom. So then what? Then he never comes out of that shell of being mommy's little boy, and he never develops his own character. Or if he does, as we'll determine later on, you get some bad results from that kind of stuff.
That you do. And this is one of the challenging parts is that for parents is, that I did very wrong when my boys would cry when they're young. My response to them was, stop acting like a little girl.
Oh.
Immaturity, right?
Sure, yeah.
Right, they're sitting there crying.
Yeah.
And there's so many better ways you can go about doing that. The way you explained it is the better way to do that. It's so much of how we speak to especially boys is tone, right? If I can come in when they're acting and crying like that I can just be quiet.
Calm. And present.
De-escalating.
Hey, I'm here. I'm present.
Yeah, you're fine. You're safe. I'm here. And de-escalate the situation rather than being you trying to match their level.
Mom freaks out when she gets there. So she's already lost control. The kid thinks, everything's lost.
Yeah.
I'm not like that. I'm very calm. Hey, buddy. He's not bleeding from some space. There'd be a different reaction there. Again, as a kid, bumped his head. It's going to happen.
Mhm.
All right, buddy, show me where. Let me see. I checked him. Okay, there's not even a welt there. It scared him probably more than anything.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's. How do we solve being scared like that again? Let's move your back against the wall and get you set up a different way. Okay, sure. Now, the what the contrast to that would be like danger. So have you thought of any like dangerous child things? I could think of a few that kind of, this is where it might denote even greater attention.
Yeah, I mean, very much, with the danger part of that is kids not knowing and paying attention when you're walking through a store, walking through the parking lot, right? And they see
Oh.
something and they take off running, right? And so now my response is different with those kids when they're in danger because they don't understand
Great
danger
point.
like that, right? And so,
How would you go about handling that?
so much of that, when you see a child almost get hit by a car, you have that knee jerk reaction where your fight or flight is kicking in, and
You
so
get scared and then you get mad.
then you get mad, right? Don't you ever do that again, right?
And then they're scared, like, oh, but
Right.
they're not tying the scared to the thing they almost did. They're tying the scared to dad's mad and I don't know
Dad's
why.
mad and I don't know why. So it's grabbing a hold of them, rescuing them, and then getting down on a knee and having a face-to-face conversation with them about
Explaining it.
here's why you need to do this or don't do this. But yeah, if you are not prepared to have that conversation with them, then yeah, there's that fear part. And so I don't want my kid to die or my grandkid to die or my niece to die. And so
Sure.
I want to have that serious conversation, but some of that too is like it's training them before you go out into the parking lot and having conversations ahead of time that
That's
this
great.
is the danger of when that happens. And if I can teach them ahead of time, then when we get out to that parking lot, they're not going to make that mistake. And I think if you can come up with a lot of different ideas of what danger is, but I think if you can take that same scenario and just train up a child in the way that they should go. So I need to have these preemptive conversations about this is what can or can happen.
Yeah, I wrote down hitting, biting, hurting others, hurting themselves, weapons, cruelty towards animals, destruction of property. Believe it or not, that kind of stuff can happen with kids.
I know kids that did it.
I might have a brother that was inclined towards a lot of these things.
Destruction
I'm
towards
not saying
property.
names.
I may or may not have been inclined towards that.
There you go. So this is going to be more into the danger.
Yeah.
Because if you see this when they're young, as what we're saying here, is any of these things need to be stopped immediately. And how do you go about doing that? The Psychology Today is where I got a lot of this information from, is engage immediately with consequences and then praise when they get back on course.
Mhm.
Immediately. So you would say if a kid is hitting, and you'll see this in like in preschools and stuff, because kids will start, that's really where they start doing these things. And thankfully these teachers usually have training in this, is you grab a kid and go, we don't do that. Saying we don't do that, engaging them with the proverbial we. You don't see me doing that. I don't walk around hitting anybody, do I? No. And you don't either. And we don't do that. And if I catch you doing it again, there's going to be a negative outcome. And then when they go about, and instead, now you need to give them an answer. What do we do instead? Did you want to play with the toy? Why don't you go ask Mary if you can play with the toy? That's what you do. You don't take it, and then you don't hit her because she's using it.
Yeah.
And then you watch for them to do it again and see what's happening. So that engagement there, and then it might take a couple of times. It's probably not going to be instantaneous. And we find that as there's less kids, like a lot of kids now are just like single kids, don't have brothers and sisters. And when that's the case, you can see even more of that because they're so used to having everything their own way.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad I grew up in the generation we grew up where we didn't have iPads and phones and all that, because so much of parenting today that I see is, here, watch this, take this. Instead of taking opportunities to train and teach, it's just watch this. I don't want to be bothered with you right now. I've got a lot going on here. And we see that type of parenting happening a lot today. And then when their kids act outrageous, they don't understand why they act outrageous. And they don't respond correctly, because now they're just always responding in anger, like a kid is somehow supposed to know exactly how they're supposed to act or respond to these situations. If I haven't done my job as a parent to teach them, and that if I don't set that stage early, then as they go into their adolescence and they go into their teenage years and so on, it's just they're going to continue to act in this manner because that's what the way they've been taught. Now, our hope is, very often as kids grow, that they're going to have a rebellious stage, and then we always say they're just going to grow out of it. But if I don't help my kids course correct that rebellious stage, they don't just grow out of it very often. Very often it just becomes a greater problem.
Sure.
And
And
then
that's kind of what we're going to see here as we move into the next phase, which is kind of like this middle adolescent, preteen, teen.
I would venture to say is probably the most formative years.
Could be. Some of the earliest stuff I discovered is some of the most formative for like social interactions.
Yes.
But certainly in this next phase is when you as the parent actually are going to face the most. It's actually easier when they're younger because they're still so spongy. And if you're doing well then, by the way, you'll have a better middle stage here.
You will. And you have to remember, but tell up about age 10, like you're their friend. Like you're their only friend. They have maybe some playtime with people and kids they see at school, but you're still dad. You're still a hero.
They're not so independent.
Yeah.
So this is where independence starts really stepping
correct.
in, as we talked about last time.
Good way to put it.
So what you're going to start seeing is some non-conforming. So actions against society. That's where you're going to start seeing kids kind of dress a little different. They're kind of like looking around and going like, who am I? And who do I want to be? And how do I want to be this person? What does that person look like?
Who do I fit in? Who is my friend group? Who do I fit in with?
Sure.
Who am I being welcomed by?
And it comes frequently with like acting out against authority. So you'll start to see them start to, again, retest some of these boundaries, especially, and they'll say things like, don't treat me like a child.
Yeah.
I'm not a kid. Dad, I'm not a kid. I can't tell you this last year how much time our son, our youngest, would say, I'm a teenager now. I go, I know, buddy, but you're still our kid. So this is the rule.
Yeah.
And he'd step back and, okay, well, he knew because we had set good boundaries in advance. But from time to time, he was kind of right too. And I go, oh, honey, he's a teenager now. But you know what that means, bud? That means more responsibility. And then,
There he is.
and then on the other side of it, then it's giving him some other sense of purpose for himself to kind of realign him. Because often he's challenging and mom's maybe changing the goalpost a little bit in a time because she still wants her baby.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is the last baby in the house. And I'm not undermining her. I'm agreeing with her in a way and then redirecting his energy and channeling his energy towards the next thing that because he is older, that means this though. And then helping him to see what his next phase in life is, his next steps in life are.
Yeah, giving him those responsibilities are critical,
Yeah.
and it is harder for a mom than for a dad.
Well, again, we're the vision setter.
We are, but the mother is their role with inside that home is the more of the nurturer than
For
anything
sure.
else. And so, especially when the last kid is coming up, it's like this is my last hurrah. My wife has been a stay-at-home that's been her role and her job. And now it's my youngest is a senior about to graduate. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, what is my role anymore? Like I've fulfilled my role and my duty. So what's my next step?
We're going to have to talk about, as a husband, how you go about working on that with her. I think that might be something to talk about here.
Absolutely.
In the
Could be something we could have a conversation about.
future. Yeah.
But
Because that's an interesting subject that I think whether men have experienced it already or will be experiencing in the future, eventually, if you're a husband and you have a wife that was stay-at-home, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, then at some point in time that has to change and shift. And what does that next phase look like? And how can a husband be a good helper in that situation? So that's an interesting conversation.
It is. We'll have to unpack that at some point in time. Yeah. But I think what we were going back to what we were talking about, like giving kids responsibility. This is a very important part at this stage of life is giving them, because they're starting in their brain to take ownership of their life. They're starting really to develop these personalities of what kind of person they're going to be.
Yeah.
And so if I don't give them some responsibility on their life, if I'm always just micromanaging their life, then when I send them out into the world, they're not going to know how to do anything.
Well, they will have like late onset development.
There's that.
And that's those kids that stay home till they're 30.
I'm out. I heard this pastor say this one time. He said, the best thing you can do for your 18-year-old is help him pack.
Sure. We can get into that too. And I think we will near the end here. They're trying to find out who they are as their independent selves, I think, in this kind of middle stage. And what we're saying is verbally dialoguing with your child through this phase is going to be essential. Being calm, being consistent. These things are going to matter everything. If you're showing a good example and you've been showing a good example, or even if you haven't, it's again, when can you start? Today, start now. And then you can go about leading them. Hey, do you see how this has worked out for you? How the outcome of this thing that you just did turned out so poorly?
Yeah.
Had you done this instead, maybe next time you can try to do this.
And
But you're going to have to face the consequences of your actions, buddy.
and this is going to be the hardest part.
It'll be very hard.
The second part that comes out of that is managing who they're friends with.
Yeah, be nosy. Who are these people you're hanging out?
We always wanted
You're the parent.
we always wanted our house to be the house that the kids came to, right? I like it that my kids want to bring their friends to our house.
Yes.
Like they want to come hang out at our house. And a lot of it, especially with my younger two, their friends like to come over because our house was a house of peace. It wasn't like that with my older two kids, but with my younger two kids, we wanted to create a house of peace.
Sure.
So that when they brought their friends over, we fed them and they hung out. We engaged with them. We hung out with them. We laughed with them. We listened to their stories. We prayed with them. Because a lot of those kids didn't have that at their house. And so being able to be that for my kids' friends was really important. With my middle son, his we actually had to cut him off the kids he was hanging out with. Like we actually had to restrict who he was hanging out with because we saw him going down a path that a major path of rebellion that we knew if he was going to continue down that path.
How'd you do that?
We set guardrails about where he was allowed to go with them.
For how long?
Until he found a new friend group. I mean, really, it really became that big of a problem. The kid that we cut him off with died of a drug overdose at 17 years old.
Jeez.
I mean, that was the path that we saw him going down. And so we had to step in and we just had to tell him, sorry, you're not going to go to this.
This young man is off limits.
Yeah,
Did you ever speak to the young man?
The young man, his house, his mom and dad had a 30-year age difference. And so, dad had 3 older kids and then got remarried to a much younger woman. And so dad was just not real involved in what he was doing. And unfortunately, there was no real discipline at that house. There was kind of a free-for-all at their house. Mom just trying to be the cool mom and dad being kind of just disengaged. And so we stepped in and we just told my son, well, you're not allowed at their house anymore.
Yeah.
And that's tough to do for them.
Sure.
To really alienate him like that. But we knew if we did not do that, it was going to be to the detriment of him. And those are hard decisions you have to make for your kids.
Sounds like it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Helping them decide who they're going to hang out with. But we say this all the time, you're a sum total of the people you spend your life with. And that doesn't matter how old you are.
Sure.
And so if your kids are making choices to hang out with kids or maybe even have a girlfriend that parents, don't really set rules or standards for what they do at their house, you have to be very, very aware of who their significant other is at that age as well, because they could start making poor decisions for their lives.
Yeah. So we're kind of moving now into like this next, maybe even late adolescence phase. That's kind of what you're speaking to when you're speaking about probably 15 to 17 age.
Or 15 to 18 age, right
14, maybe even, I guess if it's a daughter, it could be even 13 to 17.
Well, 14 to 18 would be their high school years, right?
Okay.
9th to 12th grade will be their high school years. And so I think that's really when we have to be the most involved and most aware.
You have to be nosy. You have to be nosy. You're not being, you're the parent. Don't be afraid to be the parent. Cool should always be secondary to watching out for this little human that you love.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so astonished by so many of the parents that my friend group, some of my friends group when I was a kid, the way their parents acted versus how my parents were. It was such a different thing. And I had a household where people liked to come to our house. It was a house where my parents had rules. And my mom would bring out treats and stuff, and all the other kids would come around and be like, oh, your house is really great. And then I'd reflect it now as an adult looking back and going, oh, yeah, that's right, because you were raised by only your mom, and even her, she let you smoke in the house at 15. I'm thinking some of these friends of mine is like, yeah, of course you liked it at my house. My God, yours was chaos. Mm-hmm. How'd you make it at all?
Yeah. And that those high school years too, like you hear this from a lot of parents. I just want them to like me. I just want to have a good relationship.
Because that's when they're going to be pushing furthest into this rebellious, into like self-identifying. Who am I? This is the shaping of who they think they're going to be. What they don't know is that a mere couple years later, when you get out of high school, that's actually when you find out who you are.
It is. When you get to go, when I get to go send you out into the world, we get to find out if you are a person of integrity and have I developed you into that person who's going to make good choices.
Great point.
With the discipline part, I was looking this verse up a little bit ago that came to mind, Hebrews 12:8. In Hebrews 12:8, the gist of that is that a good father disciplines. If a father doesn't discipline, you are not a legitimate child. And so if you are not a discipliner, then you're treating your children like they're illegitimate, like I don't even care about you. And so this whole process of getting them to adolescence is I want to discipline them. I don't want to, the Bible also says do not exasperate your kids. So do not go overboard with it. All right. I want to create guidelines.
So don't helicopter them.
Please don't helicopter them. I want to create guidelines. I always want to have a conversation of why.
Sure.
And
then,
then,
explain yourself.
Yeah, explain. Always explain. Here's why the rule is this. You don't know what happens.
And it's, please, please, please. My dad did this all the time. This one's the most frustrating because I said so. What? Listen, I'm not the smartest.
I did it all the time too.
I'm not the smartest guy on the planet. I'm also not the dumbest guy on the planet. Somewhere in between. Just explain to me why you think this is a bad idea, Dad.
Yeah.
And because I disliked that so much, I've set about always explaining myself to my kids and to any child around me that I have influence in. I probably over-explain, but I'd rather do that than not explain at all and have it be this nebulous thing like some authority out there said it, because I don't feel like that, especially for my life, I feel like that a lot of that, then I needed to test it anyways. So the second my dad checked out, or I checked out of the house, whatever it looked like, I went about finding out what the heck that was even anyways. So, you can't do this. Why? Because I said so. All right, well, you're here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll go do it later, which I did. And then I'd find out why he had said no. But it's like, why didn't you just explain it? And often it's because there was some hypocrisy there, because it was maybe something he was doing, like drinking.
Mm-hmm.
You can't drink. I see you drink all the time. You look like it's fun.
Right.
You're having a good time. It seems like you're laughing and you get your buddies over and they're all drinking too. This is pretty cool. Why can't I do it? Because I said so.
Cool. That's super helpful.
But you do.
Yeah. I think that's
don't
wise.
Smoke. What?
When you set a rule, give them a reason why. It's that simple.
Just explain it. Hey, here's why. Because as a 15-year-old child, if you start drinking now, the likelihood of you developing alcoholism is 8-fold greater. And I don't want that for you. And by the way, you've only seen me drink 3 times or what, and then maybe as an adult, you have to analyze how much am I drinking around these freaking kids? Maybe it should be less.
Yeah. With my kids, we have the conversation all the time. Like, you saw us when we used to drink crazy and how awful our life was. And now you get to see the redemption story and how great life is now. Not perfect, but how much better life is now. And so our conversation with our kids, especially around the topic of drinking, is, do you not remember what you saw?
Sure.
And what life is like here. So I also think it's wise to share your life. And not telling every detail of every bloody poor thing that you did, but you should be able to share with your kids some of the mistakes that you make. It's why we're doing this podcast, is we're taking our mistakes of our life and we're thinking through them and then looking back at life going, how could we have done this differently?
Right.
You should be doing the same thing with your kids, sharing your life with your kids. Here's why I don't want you to do this. Here's the
outcome.
Here's the result of that lifestyle.
Exactly.
Very often for people.
Yep.
And I want you to miss some of these potholes in life that will set you back.
Sure.
Right? So if I can teach you a different way, then I love you.
That's exactly. And that is the end piece there. Why? Because I love you so much and because I think that you're better than this.
Yeah.
Because my vision for you is so much higher than this. It's so much higher than where you've set yourself. And because I love you, because I like you too, by the way, those are 2 different things. Because I like you too, I want everybody else around to see the best version of you that I know exists.
That's right.
And as your dad, that's what I'm here to always be reinforcing in you, child of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as they reach the teenage years, like how we discipline and how we treat them is differently. It's with my teenage boys, especially, it's like, yeah, you can take stuff away from them. And should you do that? Sure. There should be a part where I'm, taking away things to help try to discipline them and help them. But it's always the coming back in and the understanding of why. Here's why I'm doing this.
The hardest disciplining I ever got was a disappointed look from one of my parents.
It's the worst.
I remember them sitting down with me and having these conversations where it's like, who are you, alien human, that we didn't put any of that in you? Where'd that come from? What is like, and being like repulsed by whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And me feeling every bit of the weight of that. Like, these people that I love, that I do care about, are this disappointed in me. Oh, God, I never want this ever again. How do I avoid this? This is awful.
That's the disciplining with teenagers that I think is probably the most effective way.
I think it's really the only way to go about doing that. Certainly grounding is useful too. But if you're going to ground a kid, I think that you should be around. Like punishment, punishment should be, it's almost for both of you in an effect. You should be under it too as the parent to make sure they're sticking around. I had, again, the same brother I kind of am inferring here. If my parents grounded him and they weren't around to enforce the grounding, he was gone. He didn't care.
Right.
And then he'd come back whenever he wanted to, and they go, "You'd ground for twice the time." You go, "All right.
Cool."
And then the minute they'd leave again and not be the warden of him, the security guards on him, he'd be back out the door again. He didn't care. The rest of us now, we respected it. So and that's another thing that's, I think, important. You're going to raise all kids are different. Holy smokes. I'm so glad I thought of that. All kids are going to be different.
That's very true, man. Oh,
my goodness. Every kid is different than every other kid. And by the way, you might do a bunch of stuff right and your kids still might rebel. Why? I don't know. I couldn't possibly say. But if the best path is the one we're trying to set again. It's not the perfect path. It's not now everything's going to work out great.
No.
You're still probably going to face quite a few hard times. You're going to. But we're hoping to kind of pave this thing a little bit and go. And then, by the way, this is that participatory part that you guys can get involved in as viewers and listeners. If you got better ideas, let us know. We can always speak about this or speak to this effect later. And as we'll speak about here towards the end, now that we got this other space that we work in, we like to go in there and kind of discuss some things in a different sense. So if there's something we need to go back and retouch on that you might think of, dear viewer, let us know. And we can re-engage in this in some future opportunity.
Absolutely.
Chat further about, hey, oh gosh, I never thought about that. This individual brought this piece up. Let's unpack this.
Yeah.
We'd love to do that. So please do that.
Yeah, because as they get into their teenage years and now they're adults, it's a little bit harder to watch adult kids
You
that
have
rebel.
to let go.
This is the hardest part as a parent is once they leave the house and they're making poor decisions. Are there times where you need to step in and help so they don't completely ruin their life? If you can, yes. But there's also a step where you have to pull yourself out and turn them over to God and allow God to do what he needs to do to get a hold of their lives. And that is the hardest thing as an adult, watching your adult children run into a wall. And then you have to allow them to run into that wall and feel every part of what it feels like to run into that wall. If you're always stepping in,
yes,
then they'll never feel the pain of that because mom and dad are always there just to help fix me when I make dumb mistakes.
The prodigal son story,
Luke 15,
in the Bible, I think is very important to kind of unpack here for a second, which is there's two sons, and one of the sons says, "Dad, I want my inheritance now, and I want to go live this life." And he leaves. Now, what we don't see is that his daddy goes and chases him down and says, "Get on back here, son."
he lets him go.
Lets him go. And his son makes a bunch of bad decisions out here in the world, and he has to pay the price for them. He has to work for a guy and get crappy wages and
Lives in a pig trough.
His life becomes horrible. It becomes unmanageable. It's so unmanageable that he says, I would be better being a slave at my father's house than being at this guy's house anymore. And he comes back, and what his dad sees from a million miles out as he sees him coming back, repentant. I think that's the key. Daddy never chased him down and fixed all of his wrongs and all the stuff. This dude had to be out there, and we don't know for how long, but he's out there long enough to realize how crappy all of his choices were. And he had pissed away all of his good opportunities, and he had nothing when he came back. Broken, head probably hanging low, and his dad's seen this is a boy who's been through it, and he knows how crummy it can be out there. And this is God saying, and this is God's great example, and that's what we want to be, is if our child does do something stupid, and is repentant for it, we can still step in with love and welcome them back in and rejoice at their returning. Oh, you've come back to be the son that we know you can be. You want to step back into this great vision I have for you. Please, I love you. You're my child. Come on. But you can't be chasing them down to fix everything, or they're never going to hit that bottom piece. I've spoken to this so many times, which is I was a severe alcoholic. And at 29, I moved back to my parents' house because I wasn't functioning, and our music wasn't, the guys couldn't have me around anymore because I was drinking that much. I just couldn't stop. And my dad, in his great spirit, he seen me within about 2 weeks of being there. He said, "You can't be here." And I go, "What? Why? You guys are supposed to help me out and get back in my feet." He goes, "No, you're not. You can't help yourself right now. And what I can do is I can take you to a treatment center, or you can find something else, but you can't stay under my roof like this. There's nothing good going to happen here. And I don't know how to help you in this because I don't have any experience with whatever this is. But I do know that there is a place where we can take you that can maybe help, but it's not here." And that was great. That was exactly what he should have done. That's what they did. He took me to a
Hardest
place.
thing you ever had to do.
Oh, he talks about it. He goes, "Man, I didn't know. Oh, it sucked." And by this point in time, I'm a pretty good manipulator. So I'm bawling and trying to get my mom to, "Well, you're going to kick me out." And thankfully she was set in, her and my dad had always had a unified front. When they had made a decision, they made a decision. Together. So there was never a going to her and trying to get her to change this. This was the outcome. This was what was going to happen. And thankfully they did, because it led me to the bottom. I was able to get myself to the bottom, to the place where it was unmanageable for me to do any of the malarkey I was doing. And I had to face the facts of things and had to get right. And through Christ was able to be redeemed, be rescued, and be pulled up out of that place and be brought to a new life. And now I get to be this side of it. And I'm so appreciative that my dad had the courage to be able to say that to me at that time.
Did you see the movie Beautiful Boy?
No.
It's with Steve Carell and Timothy Chalamet.
No.
Growing up in a healthy household, and it's based on a true story, but Timothy Chalamet, the character he plays, gets addicted to drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to watch this dad step in, and you just going back and forth between treatment and there's a scene in there where Steve Carell, the kid his son's in trouble again, and the mom and dad are divorced, and mom's like, "What are you going to do?" And he goes, "I'm not going to do anything. I have to let him feel all of this." And he wouldn't let his son move back home.
Yeah.
Just wouldn't let him come home.
Sure.
And kid ended up in treatment, and now he's sober and married. But it was that hard decision that he had to make because he loved his son.
That's right.
He had to allow his son to feel the complete burden, because they had tried everything. They had stepped in and did everything that they could possibly do. And there came to a point where they just had to let them go into the world. My parents did the same thing with me. When I left the house at 18, I got into alcohol and drugs, and they let me feel the brunt of everything. They never stepped in. I had no plan B. I tried to move back home as well, but they were like, "You can't live your life, and you can't do that here."
Yeah.
And thankfully, I met my wife, and we finally started to get clean and get back to normal life. And my dad gave me a job. It was that prodigal son. Right when I came back, he was just there with open arms, and helped me. Not that I did it perfectly it took me a long time, but he saw it was time for dad to step back in and help to restore his son and help move me in a different direction. And I'm, forever grateful to my parents for believing in me. I have the same career today because he did that for me, right? But it's that allowing your kids to walk into the depths and feel every bit of it. And the prayer is that God will restore them, right?
And you can calmly speak to them too throughout this whole thing. "Hey, I love you, but the decisions you're making are taking you to this place." And you can still answer their calls. And these are going to be hard calls to accept if you should ever find yourself in this place. Mm-hmm. And you say, "I love you. I want to help you. Here are some solutions I can help you towards." And that's what you're offering. It's not, "I can do nothing," because it doesn't sound like that's what it sounds like we're saying, but we're not saying that. What we're saying is, give some, if they're an alcoholic or a drug addict, I can get you to a place.
They can.
but I'm not gonna buy a drunk a drink. I'm not the type to do that. I know what that leads to, another drink.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't lead towards the place where we want them to be of sobriety, of health.
They call that enabling, right?
It is enabling.
Yeah.
So any of that enabling behavior, I won't participate in, but I will think of things or whatever it happens to be that your child's run into. If your child is going through marital things and it's something that they themselves brought upon the marriage, son or daughter, this is the outcome of that. And I want to be here on the other side of it, but you did this thing that has now caused this thing and the outcome is yours. And I'll be there to love you and be there to support you. And I always do those things. However, you need to take these next steps to either rectify whatever you've done. And when you have, I'm still here.
Yeah. I want to, as we end this here, this is something that as I was praying through what it is to have a rebellious child, that I think God really laid on my heart was that as parents, when you have done what you believe to be your role to teach them and your kids rebel anyways, a lot of times we can feel ashamed and embarrassed.
Oh, great point.
And we don't want to talk to other people about the bad choices our kids are making because we feel that's a reflection on us. Please, 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 please. That is a lie from the pits of hell that somehow your lack of what you believe your lack of parenting, because you're always looking at what they're doing, going, what could have I done different? What could I have done different? What could I have done different? Are there things you could have done different? Always. Just because there are things you could have done different doesn't mean I take ownership of the poor choices my kids are making. It is to your detriment for you to have rebellious kids and you never share your life with anybody. The Bible tells us to carry each other's burdens, share it with one another. And so if you are going through this right now with a rebellious kid and you have hidden your kid or hidden the choices your kids are making away from other people, stop. You need to share with what your kids are doing with other people so that people can begin to pray, because the only way I can see out of this is us laying a covering of prayer over each other's kids, that they will one day make a step back towards Jesus.
And I think, when you open that door to honesty and you let other people in, you'll find out that there's other people out there that have probably experienced a similar thing.
God, that's good. You're so right,
go
man.
Like, hey, man, I'm so... here's what happened. And this person's they'll light up. So, oh man, I remember when my kid, and you go, what? Oh, and it takes so much of that weight off. We always say this, but the devil wants you isolated, making you feel like you ain't enough. No matter what that is his ground, and don't cede that ground to him. You should always be looking we always say you should have a mentor. So that's someone in your life that you respect, that you see they're walking a good path and you can speak to them. You should have someone like that, and you should have someone behind you too that you are mentoring. And those are people you can chat with. By the way, you can still talk to someone you're mentoring and say, yeah, well, here's what I'm going through too. And then they can learn from that.
Yeah. You
should be open about your things. Again, if you're going about living your life and you think and you identify that, I'm doing the things that should be getting done here, then there's nothing to be ashamed of.
That's it. And
man, I'm really glad you brought that up. Share with someone. If there's someone in your friend circle, or maybe you need to make some new friends. If you think nobody in your friend circle can understand, who are you hanging out with? Who's that sum total? Because I don't feel like there's anybody in my friend group that I can't share things with when I'm going through them. So I don't have a lot of hidden things in my heart anymore. I just get to share things. And when they start to fester up, I go, hey man, what do you think about this? So it's just critical in life to develop some friends that are, we think, Christian. That'd be great. But if you're not a Christian, some people that are walking a good path that you respect. And you should feel confident enough to bring these things to them, and it is going to help you get through it. Whether it's just to speak it out and help your own heart and take some of that burden off your own shoulders, that isolation off your own shoulders. But I think you'll find on the other end of it too, there's a lot of people that have had experiences that, if not the same, are similar.
Yeah.
Or know someone or know some other information that can help, mitigate some of the fullness of whatever it is you're feeling.
Yeah.
Well, there we are. Once again, right around the corner, and boom, it's over. Guys.
Gals.
We are the Untrained Philosophical Discussionists. My name's Jonny Hanson. That's my good buddy Andy Lamb, and we just thank you so much for joining us today. This has been the third part of our fatherhood series. This is the rebellion part, and gosh, what do you got to say to close this thing out, buddy? You got any ideas?
Yeah, just
Final thoughts?
Yeah, you said it a moment ago, but if you have questions about, you're dealing with a rebellious kid and you just have questions, you don't know what to do next and you want to reach out, email us updpodcast@gmail.com, direct message us on, Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and YouTube. And we would love to, correspond with you. We don't have all the answers. We have some.
We're good at, if we don't have answers too, we have a lot of friends that have
We have
answers.
a lot of resources.
We are the kind of guys that will go find out some things and get back to you with some answers that we think will be valuable and we think you'll find value in too.
Yeah.
We're definitely the type to go, hey man, I don't know much about that, but let me get back to you. And we will.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks again. We are UPD, and we just want to pray that you have a deep and a fulfilling relationship with Jesus and that he blesses you all the days of your life.
And all God's people said.
They said amen.
Sure did, man. Have a great week, man.
You too, pal.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.